Jane, thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to be with you, President Grimson. It's always good to see you. And we reflected just a couple moments this morning before the program began about the very nice evening we had at Alice Rogoff's home some years ago, where we discussed for the first time this concept of the Arctic Circle, what it would look like, how it would be different, who our audience would be. And I will tell you, I am honored to this day that I was included in that small group of broad thinkers about how we can transform the discussion in this country and really around the world about the Arctic. So my thanks, my everlasting thanks, go out to the two of you, to all that's going on here at the Wilson Center. Just thank you for helping us move the needle when it comes to the Arctic discussion. So this is an important day for Arctic nations. It's one of my favorite days, but not here in Washington, D.C. It's summer solstice, which for us in Alaska, longest day of the year, and everybody's up. Everybody's up, literally, figuratively. I look at all my friends here from Utqiagvik. We love this time of year when the daylight just energizes us for lots of different reasons. So happy Solstice Day. This is also, for two of the Arctic nations, additionally important because June 21st marks the anniversary of the ratification of the U.S. Constitution back in 1788, as well as the anniversary of Greenland assuming self-rule in 2009. So I'm not going to suggest that here today at the Wilson Center there's going to be some historic document that is signed and agreed to. Probably not. But if you look around the room, if you look at those who have not only committed to be here to speak, but the many, the 600 plus, who have committed to be a participant in one way, shape, or another, I think it is a reminder that what we are all talking about is vitally important. It's obviously a fair amount of attention being paid to the Arctic right now. Some of us would say it's about darn time, but there is obviously a fair amount of attention that is being paid in particular to the United States and Russia and that relationship. And I think it is important to note that the conversation today and tomorrow here at the Wilson Center is going to be an entirely different conversation than what is happening at the end of Pennsylvania Avenue here. So there have been quite a few commentators who wonder if the recent disputes, the differences, the tension that we see between the United States and Russia, is this going to spill over into the Arctic, impacting the consensus work, the good work that we've seen through the Arctic Council, through the Arctic Circle, through the Standing Committee on the Arctic Parliamentarians? Is this going to impact us? I, too, am an optimist. I am an optimist in the Arctic space, so I prefer to look at this perhaps from a little bit different angle and suggest that why can't the cooperative nature of the Arctic be the driving force for resolving our conflicts everywhere else? Instead of taking it from the negative, let's view it from the positive and say, we have a constructive relationship in this space. Let's build on this and let's help diffuse some of the differences elsewhere. So when relationships are strained, as they are today, I think it can be helpful to look to the Arctic as a path forward, an area where collaboration and cooperation has been and is occurring. And I think you don't need to dial back too very far to see some very specific examples of where we have proved this again and again. Go back to 2013. This was the Arctic Council ministerial in Kiruna. And at that time, it was Secretary of State Kerry and Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov. They were standing side by side, signing a binding agreement on oil spill preparedness in the Arctic. And if you'll remember, and I see Ambassador Bolton nodding his head, he remembers. We remember what was going on at that time. There were some very serious differences going on over Syria and U.S. Embassy spy charges that were the hot topic of the day. So that was happening in this sphere. And in Kiruna, you had Secretary Kerry and Foreign Minister Lavrov standing there executing the agreement on oil spill preparedness. And then just last month in Fairbanks at the ministerial there, obviously relations still strained, but Secretary Tillerson and Foreign Minister Lavrov signed yet another binding agreement on scientific cooperation in the Arctic. And I think perhaps just as important to that, the process to develop that binding agreement was co-chaired by the United States and Russia. So this just wasn't, we're going to sign an agreement that others have worked through. It was the United States, it was Russia coming together with this scientific cooperation agreement, penned by them. The Arctic Council also launched the new Arctic Ship Traffic Data Cooperative Agreement at the Fairbanks Ministerial. The intent is to have a better understanding of the ships that are operating in the Arctic, collecting information to develop trend analysis and the like. And this is important, of course, because shipping through the United States portion of the Arctic has increased by nearly 60% over the past 8 years. We all know it's expected to grow as sea ice diminishes. And for the two nations that share that choke point of the Bering Strait, knowing who is shipping what and where is vital for homeland security, for local security, and navigational necessity. Now, it's also worth noting that vessel traffic in the U.S. Arctic was significantly higher in 2015 than in previous years. This was due to Shell's activity in the Chukchi, but that demonstrates just how quickly the private sector can mobilize their activities, and then how quickly we could see that activity increase into the future. So the more infrastructure we can stand up now, the better off we will be as we seek to manage increased activity going forward. Arctic infrastructure, certainly one area where Russia is well ahead of us in the United States, and I include icebreakers in that equation. We're making a little bit of headway here. I just had an icebreaker update last week, and we are advancing this. Again, it's not as quickly as I would like. It's not going to come close to Russia's own initiatives. President Putin noted last week that Russia is in the process of building 4 new LK-60 icebreakers. These are capable of breaking up to 9 feet of ice. And he also said that the next generation lighter icebreaker would be constructed that can break through nearly 15 feet of ice. So they're moving forward. I'm not saying here that the United States needs parity with Russia on this matter. All you need to do is look at the map. Russia comprises nearly half of the Arctic. But I do think we need to do a little bit better. We keep talking about enhancing our icebreaker fleet. And I somewhat sarcastically say that 1.5 icebreakers does not constitute a fleet. We must do better, and we will. But what we see with Russia is that they have made investment in the Arctic a priority. And quite frankly, to this point in time, we have not seen that same commitment to a priority. So I have called on the United States to increase its presence in the Arctic, both physically and politically, to demonstrate the continued leadership in the region, post-chairmanship of the Arctic Council, and also to reassure our northern neighbors that the United States places great importance on the region. And I think that we can do this in a non-threatening manner. by using existing infrastructure and operations so that this zone of peace in the Arctic is not destabilized. I had an opportunity in April to speak at the Arctic Encounter Symposium in Seattle. Many of you actually in this audience were with us that evening, and I outlined 4 different areas where I thought that we would have an opportunity to do just that. One suggestion was that the United States needs to re-engage with regards to the use of the Naval Air Station Keflavik in Iceland. And I had suggested that we could have an expanded role in Iceland again. We talk about an Arctic port. We talk about an Arctic port in the United States every day. We talk not only about one Arctic port, but a system of Arctic ports. So, President Grimson, when you tell me that China has its Arctic port, it makes me feel even more anxious about the fact that we, in the U.S., do not have our deepwater Arctic port. So now I've got another kind of incentive behind me to remind the folks in the administration that we got to get cooking here. Third area that I had suggested might be an opportunity for us to demonstrate our presence in the Arctic would be to establish a consulate office in Greenland, even if it's just kind of a one-person shop. And I made the suggestion that, look, Greenland may or may not be on a path towards independence from Denmark. If they do become independent, then we will have established a political representation on the island, and we'll have had some for several years, and we'll be in a good position to move forward with a new relationship. If they don't, no harm, no foul. So recognizing that there are areas that we might be able to again, have that relationship established. And another point that I had raised was enhancing our Arctic military training. I was in Norway about a month ago with a delegation from the Senate along with our Secretary of Interior, and we had a chance to go to Værnes and to talk with the Marines that have been training there for a 6-month stint. So recognizing that if we have opportunities and support from that host country, that these are not bad initiatives. Jane mentioned the national security aspect of the Arctic and the fact that we can't be ignoring our maritime and our Arctic borders. I think it's important for us to be evaluating the changes that are taking place in the Arctic, to assess the entry points, to establish partnerships, whether with Canada or otherwise, processes to maintain domain awareness. The Arctic Coast Guard Forum is an excellent venue to start these discussions. So these are areas that are already out there that we just need to be more engaged. These are all goals for the national government, but we also have to consider interaction at the sub-national government level as well. Back in 1996, the Arctic Council was established as the preeminent governmental forum for issues related to the Arctic region. But well before its formation, the sub-national governments had already recognized the need to reach across political borders to address commonalities such as social policies, environmental, climatic concerns, and economic development. So let me give you an example of where we saw this. In 1974, the first International Conference on Human Environment in Northern Regions led to the creation of the Northern Forum, which serves to improve transboundary cooperation. The Northern Forum now includes 18 subnational or international governments, including the state of Alaska and most of Russia's Arctic regional governments. So Governor Hickel at the time, and one of the founding members of the forum, noted that Arctic regions and countries have to work together to solve these common problems. Good advice that needs to play out to this day. And he also suggested that it needs to be conducted kind of outside of the spotlight, outside of the political heat that I think we often feel. Last month, subnational governments came together to discuss common challenges and solutions when 12 mayors from Arctic communities in Alaska, in Canada, Finland, Iceland, Norway, they held their own forum on the sidelines of the Fairbanks ministerials. And they spoke to the local concerns, the things that each of them are engaged with, whether it was economic diversification, infrastructure investment, energy independence, efforts to adapt to a changing climate, incorporation of traditional and local knowledge into decision making. But you had a group of mayors coming together across political boundaries who were really working to be a greater voice, perhaps a more local voice in the national and the international discussions surrounding the Arctic. And this information sharing, that really speaks to the quality of life in the Arctic, particularly in the underdeveloped areas of the Arctic. This was substantive discussion. Substantive discussion. I was really pleased to be able to be there just listening about the conversations. And then a little bit further back in March, the Wilson Center's Polar Initiative, which was mentioned in conjunction with Canada's Centre for International Governance Innovation, held a forum called the North American Arctic, Building a Vision for Regional Collaboration. And that forum brought together leaders from Alaska and Greenland, the Canadian territories of Yukon, Northwest Territories, Nunavut, and they were talking about areas where subnational governments in the Arctic region can work together. And as a result of that forum, the leaders agreed that continued discussion and interaction would be beneficial moving forward. So you had a similar types of discussion and engagement. And we see that occurring also through the Northern Forum. Again, areas where it's important to recognize that this type of interaction benefits our nation, it's consistent with our national interests. And I guess I would suggest to you that if we can bypass some of the intricacies, how's that for a politically correct term? Some of the intricacies of Washington, D.C. and Moscow, and focus on the unique interests and the character of each region. Interaction by subnational governments can provide the United States, I think, with the ability to learn, to inform, and to derive national benefits. There's a lot of different avenues and paths forward when it comes to American and Russian interest in the Arctic. And I do not believe that they need to be marked by stark differences and antagonism that so often drive the daily news about our two countries. I believe that we have more in common than differences in the region, and this is certainly true at the subnational level. And the Arctic is that place, should be that place, where the transboundary cooperative nature of the region tends to influence discussions and outcomes. So I'm just very, very pleased, again, that the Wilson Center is hosting this, that this kind of dialogue is going on. I think it is critically important at this time of just tension and anxiety about a relationship between two countries, that we can be gathered in a forum like this to discuss our areas of consensus, of commonality, and of cooperation. I thank you all for being here, and the fight goes on. Thank you.